Welcome to the Totally Unreal Book Club Podcast, an improvised comedy podcast where everything's made up and the books aren't real. But we'll never admit that. Are you ready? Let's do it.
This book club is totally unreal.
I'm your host, Willwood, and at the table today we have, starting to my left, Caitlin Dawkins.
I'm emotionally constipated. I haven't given a shit in 3 days.
That's Dahi English.
I don't know what to say to that. It's a common response from me.
Yeah.
And following that, we have a couple of special guests. We recently guested on their podcast, Pointless Discussions, where we did a segment on Planet H. That was Steve, Caitlin, and myself. Steve's not here, so screw him. But what we do have is Paul Schroyer.
Hi, I'm Paul Schroyer, and sometimes I talk.
And Mark also has a last name.
It's Reynolds, and glad to be here.
Mark Reynolds. Cool. I'm Will Wood, as I said earlier, in case you forgot.
Still Willwood.
So, before we start with with this week's book, I'd just like to take a very quick second to talk to our guests from Pointless Discussions. Tell me, guys, what do you do?
Well, we run a improvised comedy podcast where we usually bring a guest on, do like a free form interview with them, talk to them about if they got any specialties, certain topics, or if they're another podcast host. I said sometimes I talk. I didn't say I talked all the time.
Sometimes he does.
Podcast hosts like you guys, and then we invite them on to do a little improv sketch at the end, which we've been working on, which we compile into a final project, into a continuous story. And I think we've been doing that for about 40 episodes right now.
Yeah, probably about 7 months.
And
wow.
It fits together pretty good. It's been working out nice.
We only have about half that amount of episodes, but we're young and weak and frail, so you can easily best us in combat. But moving on from that, let's go ahead and jump into what we do here, and let's discuss and review the book. Now, you guys, as the guests, I think, collaboratively picked the book that we were going to review this week, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We picked a book that Mark and we like to do this book and read this book in between podcast recordings, and it's a real close, dear book to us. Mark, you want to tell them the title of it?
Sure. It's Lightning Struck Rainbow, a choose-your-own adventure by Bradley Stanmore.
Yeah. Bradley Stanmore. Oh, man.
He's a great author, I'll tell you what.
Yeah. No, and I love the choose-your-own adventure books. It's actually funny because the... he just realized what we read this week.
Get with the program.
No, I didn't realize it was Choose Your Own Adventure. I just read it sequentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get your
Probably didn't
perspective
make
on
much
that.
sense then.
We'll get your perspective on that as we go through. I love the Choose Your Own Adventure. I want to talk just very quickly about how Stanmore, and this is little known trivia, so the Goosebumps book series, of course, in the 90s, in the mid-90s, they came out with their own Choose Your Own Adventure
R.L.
series.
Stein is the author.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten to that because R.L. Stein isn't the important part. The Goosebumps series is the important part. And even though R.L. Stein fathered it, he actually didn't write any of those books at all. And if R.L. Stein wants to, would like to come on the podcast and
refute that.
Yeah, refute that. At TUBC Podcast on Twitter. But since he, until he refutes it, whatever I say is law. So he didn't write any of his stories. He went out and got ghostwriters for the Goosebumps books. And Bradley Stanmore was...
Oh, I get it. They were ghostwriters because spooky books.
It makes sense.
It does, perfectly.
Bradley Stanmore always wanted to be a ghostwriter, specifically for the Goosebumps series, but they would never accept his books because, as they said, they were terrible. So what Bradley Stanmore did was he went out on his own, and instead of being a ghostwriter, he became a zombie writer, which is why this book is a zombie choose-your-own-adventure that also has to do with lightning and rainbows.
Yes.
Right. And like in most choose-your-own-adventure books, you know, you're reading through and you choose something and you always end up dying. But what I love about this book is it actually starts out with you dying and you choose your adventure from there.
Yeah, I thought that was actually a pretty good choice that Bradley made for this book.
Yeah, which is where some of those paths, you know, zombies come up. Other paths, really off the rail things happen, but we'll wait for spoilers for all of that. Dahi, of course, had a very different experience because he just read the book cover to cover.
Yeah.
So since you read the book cover to cover, would you like to read the back cover?
Yeah, sure. I'll read the back of this one for sure. Do you have the copy there?
Yeah, I do. And actually, what I'd like is, I'd like Paul and Mark, actually, to, after you're done reading the back cover, I'd like them to read the author's note, inside the front cover.
Okay. All right. So the back cover reads, "Hey kids."
The hell it does. I'm not reading this book. It doesn't say, "Hey kids, don't patronize me."
Look at it.
Oh.
It does.
Hey kids.
Hey kids. Would you like to go on a new adventure? One that you choose yourself? Well, this is what this book is.
I like how it puts a P on the end of well.
Yeah,
Whelp.
it's a whelp.
Yeah.
This is what this book is, so choose your adventure wisely. Death may only be the beginning.
But it may also be the end.
Thank you for finishing it.
Yeah, you're welcome. It then goes on to say, oh, by the way, in case you were thinking that this was the end, you're wrong, because the real end comes from your family and their demise.
And if you would like to not read this book, please put it down. If you would like to read this book, please turn to page 1.
And that's the secret of this book, because the first page is the back cover.
Wow.
And the second page is the inside of the front cover with the author's notes, which Mark and Paul will read right now.
All right. So Bradley, he writes, R.L. Stine, he thought I was garbage. He might have been right. Who's to really know? If you want to keep reading, turn the page. Do not read this cover to cover.
I guess you didn't follow those directions, did you?
You didn't read the author's notes, did you?
I read them last.
Oh, you read it Japanese style, like a Japanese manga, where you read from right to left.
Well, I mean, it started on the back cover, so that's what I assume.
That's true.
So not only did you not read it as it's supposed to, you read it from the back to the front.
Well, that's actually a good point to bring up too, because this book was exclusively published in Japan. Now, it was in English, but see, because
I thought there was a few things that were lost in translation when I was reading it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, because Stanmore had such a feud with R.L. Stine that R.L. Stine went to all his publishing buddies and said, don't you let this Stanmore guy publish a book. Because if you do that, I'm going to publish a hook in your face. Allegedly. And so what Stanmore had to do was to take his book over to the Japanese publishing company, Fukuyu Books. And so they exclusively published it, but in order to get it back into the U.S. and North American market, they simply published it in English and then just imported it over. But it's still in the traditional Japanese format of left to right. I mean, it's not. No. It's not. But you think it is because it's got the Japanese flag all over the book. Like, it's just everywhere.
I did notice that.
And because the first page is the back page, you kind of think like, okay, this must be where you start from. Like,
right. Now, I actually didn't realize it was the flag because all the pages are white, so I just thought somebody was putting red circle stickers on the book. But
I thought it was his his author's stamp. Authors do that sometimes, right? Like they stamp the pages on their books so you know that it's one of theirs.
Yeah, every single page.
Yeah.
But it does also But it does also say the title of the book when you read it from the back cover, which is actually the front cover.
Sorry, what?
Well, we would see it as the front cover. That's why you started on the front cover, because it's printed backwards as if the front cover is the back cover.
What?
It makes sense if you want it to.
Okay.
And
I don't want it to.
And so, but of course, the title of the book, Lightning Struck Rainbow, published in Japan. So that would be why, of course, you think that. Anyway, this is, you know what, let's just get into the book. Are we ready to jump into spoilers and really tear this thing down?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, cool. Spoiler warning going up.
Warning. Incoming spoiler. Warning. Incoming spoiler.
So we're totally in spoilers now. We're ready to go. How do we want to start this? Because normally we do sort of just like a plot outline, but of course there are exactly 14 different story paths in this.
Right.
But some of them intersect with other story paths, and then some of them... there's one story path that actually destroys the book, but we'll save that one for last.
Oh, that's why I don't have a book anymore.
Well,
I don't
it
think
instructs
I've
you.
actually taken that path yet. And all
I
the
also,
times I've read it.
because that path actually happens within the first third of the book by flipping around, you probably didn't get to finish the last 2/3 anyway.
With the first third, actually. 'cause I
Oh,
read
right,
it
it's backwards, yeah.
Yeah.
Or you read it backwards.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is a fun book.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's so here's what I want to do. So there's 14 different story paths. I assume, other than Dahi, I went through the book and read all 14 story paths. I assume you all did too,
I did
right?
the same that I used to do when I was a kid reading Goosebumps. When there was a split in the story, and I would choose, path A over path B, I would keep my finger in the page where that split would happen, and then I would just backtrack and
I like keeping my fingers in splits too, but that's
I know
different.
you do.
Well, that's the only way to read a choose your own adventure book. I thought
you
everyone did that.
You gotta find out
I found
everything.
a new way to read one, apparently.
Yeah. Of
You
course,
found the only wrong way to read a choose your own adventure.
So Mark and Paul, you guys went through all 14 stories as well? Like
Well,
14 paths?
we've only done 13 because we didn't know there was one that destroyed the book.
To
It is a
destroy
secret. It is a secret one. Unfortunately, Caitlin and I both did that, and Dahi did that. So we actually went out and purchased a new copy of the book just for Dahi to read the back of
And
it.
you got to order it straight from Japan.
Yeah.
Takes 3 to 6 months to get.
Yeah, you can actually. There are some Etsy sellers that are selling it. Strangely enough,
You can buy anything on Etsy.
Well, I got mine on Japan Amazon.
most people go to Amazon.co.jp, but
No,
but
this is an independent.
Japan is on. Is better. Basically, because the reason why they're better is because
Less taxes.
well, I was just going to say because they're less worse than Amazon.co.jp, but
So how many
is it
yen did you have to pay
.co.jp
for
or is it
Caitlin?
just
It's whatever you want it to be, Will.
4?
4 yen? Wow,
Wow,
4
that's a
cents.
deal.
That is yeah. Well,
Yeah.
roughly 4 American cents.
Yeah, that site is going to be shut down real fast because they're not making any profit.
Actually, in Canada, of course, because we abolished the penny, it rounds up to 5 cents. But
Ooh, you got ripped off there.
well, I mean, you essentially paid an extra 25% for that book.
Yeah, but it was valued at 14 times what I paid.
Easily.
So, let's okay. So, Mark and Paul, why don't you guys start? We'll just go around the table and we'll just kind of go through everyone's sort of paths that they took.
Yeah.
And for those of us who've read all of them, if you've heard a path that's already been taken, just simply go down another path. And when we get to Dahi, we'll see what happens. Okay. So, Mark, why don't you start, Mark, and you tell me the path that you took, and then Paul, you go, and then we'll go around like that.
Now, are we going start to finish or just the
basically
first
pick
choice?
whatever your like favorite path was.
Okay. I would say my favorite one was probably the one where the main character, Bob Stevens.
Bob Stephen Tanbor.
Yeah, Bob Stevens, when he woke up in the hospital.
Bob Stevens Tanbor.
And he saw
Don't forget
that,
the Tanbor.
he saw that there wasn't any other people in the hospital, so he was kind of wondering, like, you know, what's going on here? And then he wandered outside and noticed that even though it was, you know, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was completely dark outside. So what he decided to do was go to
You mean what you decided to do?
Gas station, because there's always people at gas stations trying to get gas. And that's actually where he met the first zombie that he actually came across.
Rainbow,
yes. Rainbow was the first zombie. And pretty much they just went on all different kinds of adventures together. The ending that I actually got from this story was the one where Rainbow dies because he can no longer find brains to feast upon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the starvation ending.
Yep.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you bring that up because, of course, while there's 14 different story paths, there's only 3 different starting paths. And so you did the main starting path, and then, like you said, where they have multiple different adventures, of course, that's where it starts breaking off into other paths. But you got the ultimate starvation ending.
Yep.
Which is actually the saddest ending. Well, it's one of the top 13 saddest endings.
Yeah,
I definitely shed at least 3 tears when I got to that last page.
Well, there's 3 pages describing Bob Stevens holding Rainbow in his arms while Rainbow slowly.
Tanbor.
Yeah, that's his last name. Why do I need to say his whole fucking full name?
First of all, way to waste that swear in that part. But secondly, what? No.
So it's 3 whole pages of.
Listen, it's important. Okay, because he kept handing his business cards out to everybody, and he wanted to separate himself as Bob Stevens Tanbor from the neighborhood Bob Stevens Janbor. Because Bob Stevens Janbor is a very important villain in some of the arcs, but he's not to be confused with Bob Stevens Tanbor. That's why it's important, Caitlin.
I just referred to him in my head as Janbor. Like, Bob Stevens was the main character, and then Janbor was the evil guy.
Yes, but there's the whole identity fraud path.
Well, we'll get to that.
Anyway. All right.
What I was saying is there's 3 whole pages of Rainbow dying in his arms and then describing how awful and sad it is.
And the whole time, Bob Steven Tanbor was offering his brain up. You know, he kept saying, like, you can have my brain, eat my brain, and Rainbow wouldn't do it.
Nope.
Yeah.
The bond of friendship was just too strong. He couldn't eat his brain.
Now, I don't actually remember 3 pages. Well, I do remember 3 pages like that, but, like, I feel like the gap between those moments was very big.
Oh, yeah. It made you flip to a different page at the end of each page.
Yeah. This is, like, he was in Bob Stephen Tanbor's arms, right? Dying, and then the next second
he's in Bob Stephen Janbor's arms.
Yeah,
living.
And then the next second there's a gun to Bob's head, and like I didn't know what was going on.
To Bob Stevens Tanbor or Bob Stevens Janbor?
It just said Bob.
So you don't know.
I didn't know.
That was very confusing for you in the way that you read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it was probably Janbor, but we'll get to that. I don't know because there's multiple different paths, and we read them not stupid. So, anyway, Paul, why don't you go ahead and give your one of your paths that you.
Okay, well, we all know you wake up in the hospital and you head to the gas station.
Right, that's the main one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I got to the gas station, I took the path where you actually become a zombie. And you actually don't ever meet Rainbow in this path. And once you become a zombie, I had him walking around, you know, pretty much the gas station for pretty much the entire book until he was struck by a lightning bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, I remember seeing something about like the gas station, like exploding shards everywhere. Yeah.
Now, you have to be careful because you got very close to the secret 14th ending where the book no longer exists, but it sounds like you narrowly avoided it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we'll
got
go
close to it too.
Yeah, we'll go over the special path at the end that you got to take. But So I'll go. So playing off that, I also will go. Well, let's just go since there's 3 main starts. Let's just go over let's just go over them in order. So
all the gas station.
Yeah. So continue on with the hospital gas station one. So when I got to the gas station, I chose the manage the gas station route.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite paths to actually take.
I very rarely actually take that one. It just doesn't seem like it would lead to very many adventures. I could be mistaken, though.
Well, so what happens is, and of course, this can break off a little bit too. And actually, you have to manage the gas station. It's part of the secret path. But so, when you start managing the gas station, of course, what happens is that the previous manager has been eaten by Rainbow. And so what you can do is you can either run away or you can become a zombie. Well, actually, you become a zombie earlier before you meet Rainbow. It's actually a bit of a spoiler, but you kind of become the replacement for Rainbow when you do that. That's why Rainbow doesn't show up, of course. Right. But what you can also do is you can just basically, there's the option, which maybe Caitlin might explain if that's the next one that she wanted to take, but whatever. There's one where, of course, you get the shotgun and you can blow the brains of the manager zombie and Rainbow, and then you can go off about your path. But you can also then choose to manage the gas station, and so that's what I chose to do. And of course, immediately you have to spend 4 or 5 pages just balancing the books. And that's actually kind of tricky because you have to go out and purchase extra copies to balance them, because otherwise it's really easy to balance the one book you're reading because like you just put it on the table. But if you go out and purchase multiple copies of the book and you balance them in just the right way.
Oh, so you took that literally, that you had to balance the books.
Well, that's what I thought at first, because I'm an idiot. So that's what I think
that's what Stanmore was getting at.
But then when I finished balancing my physical books in front of me, which, by the way, I took a picture.
Yeah, and he spent a lot of time yelling at the cat because she kept knocking it over.
Yeah. But anyway, then I went back to the book of the path that I was on, and it just kind of kept going. So I assumed that I did it right, but maybe...
Well, really,
maybe
the reason why Stanmore added the balancing of the books into Lightning Struck Rainbow was because he was going through a lot of financial troubles at the time, and he really just needed somebody to balance his accounts for him.
Oh, that's why there was the Excel document in the middle of the book that was just literally the author's
finances and income.
Yeah, and then of course there's also the URL to download the PDF so that you can balance the books and then email it to him.
Yeah.
And he will then send you a free copy of the book you just read so you can balance it.
Or a check for 4 yen. It's the same thing.
He'll reimburse the price of the book, but only from the Japanazon website, because that's his preferred seller. But anyway, so after I finished, yeah, right there, Di. After I finished balancing the books and went back in, of course, then you have to start restocking the chips. And so I basically did that, and then of course a couple customers come by and you pump the gas, and then you hire some staff, and then you got to break up a fight between Mindy and her boyfriend because they're both working at the gas station at the same time, and that's a conflict of interest. And then HR comes down and they're breathing down your neck, and you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man, I'll deal with it." And then ultimately it just becomes too much for you. Your marriage falls apart. Your kids get hardcore into drugs, and you blame yourself for it. And essentially, at the end, you get a dog, but the dog loses a leg, which is very unfortunate. This is actually one of the sadder endings of the 13. And then at the end of it, you basically just become an old man, and you die from old age, feeling unfulfilled, and just like, I should have just taken the car. But instead, I managed the gas station, and it ruined my whole life. And at the very end, as he's laying on his deathbed, waiting to die, he gets struck by lightning, and then a zombie eats his face.
Which is the essential way to die of old age.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
Yep. So that was the path I took.
Well, I also went to the gas station initially, but then I did take the car. It was a Porsche.
After you shot the two guys with the car.
Well, yeah, it goes without saying.
Yeah.
I took the Porsche and took it on a road trip to Vegas, which was completely untouched by any zombie issues. So there was no zombies from that point on. I went to Vegas, became a Vegas showgirl. Even though Bob Stevens' Tambor identifies as a man, and it became a Vegas showgirl. There were a couple paths where you had to choose the color of your outfit. I always went with red because I like red.
I preferred the black and blue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You mean the gold and white?
Well, they were right beside each other. There's two paragraphs, and I was confused which one I actually went with.
You can either pick the white and gold or the
It doesn't
black
matter.
and blue.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Some people on Twitter will yell about the choice you made, but
I didn't make a choice.
Really
I did
matter.
both.
It's just a matter of perspective, really.
Yeah.
And I really like the
both.
fact that at that point in the book, whatever choice you made automatically uploaded to Twitter to tell everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
And it just said black and blue or
that's-
red and white.
yeah,
It didn't,
that's if-
gold and white.
That's if you plugged the optional USB cable into your computer or phone. There is a USB cable coming out of the spine of the book, and if you plug that into your computer or phone, then it uploads your stuff.
I didn't realize that was optional.
You don't have to do that, but sometimes there is built-in Wi-Fi on the book, and so it will actually flip on without you knowing, and then sometimes your choices just go up there anyway. It's also a way for the government to monitor you, but, I mean, what isn't, right?
Well, the Japanese government.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they want to know, like, what kind of Gachapon capsules you would be most interested in purchasing.
Yeah. It's all about the research. Yeah.
For me, I like the mini consoles, like the little PlayStation that you can plug the controller in and stuff. That's very cute. But anyway.
So, Bob Stevens' Tambor is in Las Vegas as a showgirl, and he's the headliner, actually. He's doing so well. And Celine Dion hires him to perform in her show because he's so amazing, and his high kicks are just breathtaking.
Well, you could actually choose between Celine Dion hiring you or Carrot Top hiring you.
Yeah,
weird.
I went with Celine.
It's weird. I was hired by both.
It's interesting how everything happened to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I didn't go with Carrot Top. I went with Celine Dion. And the story ended with Celine Dion belting so high in a rendition of "My Heart Will Go On" that one of the chandeliers shattered, and it exploded into like very tiny, sharp, razor sharp crystal pieces, and impaled Bob Stevens like thousands of times, and he died bleeding out in Celine Dion's
Well, you could
arms.
actually choose between thousands of times or dozens of times, but it sounds like you went a little more, morbid.
I thought it was Carrot Top that sung "My Heart Will Go On."
Well, that's the other branch.
Oh, I suppose that paragraph wasn't very descriptive about who was singing.
Oh, so you just assumed
what
it
you're
was
talking about is because there wasn't enough room to fit in individual pages for every path. Some of them actually have the page just split into opposite paragraphs for which path you're on, which is also confusing. This might be why R.L. Stine would not hire Bradley Stanmore.
The formatting was a little iffy, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so of course, if you take the Carrot Top path, it's generally the same, except that when the chandelier shatters, they form into hundreds of tiny little creatures that jump into your body and eat you from the inside out.
Now, I took the Carrot Top path, but the death I got was Gallagher came out and Carrot Top held you down like a watermelon, and Gallagher hit you with his giant mallet and exploded your head everywhere.
Oh, that's because you took the black and blue dress.
Oh, okay.
Slight
If you take the white and gold dress, then you get the little eaten from inside out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So many possibilities with this book.
That's what I love about Choose Your Own Adventures. You just never know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
That's true. If you did, you wouldn't really be choosing it.
Are those all the branches in the gas station initial branch?
Yeah, sort of.
think?
I mean, I say 14, but that's sort of like, I mean, there's many varying.
It's a tree. There's big branches that branch out and
14
branch out.
roughly in the end. So, that's mostly, those are the main ones, and then they kind of branch off on the other. There's one more major, path that runs off the gas station, and that's basically, what you have to start with to get the secret ending. You do have to manage the gas station, but we'll get to that afterwards. So let's move on then to the second. Dahi, did you want to, or are you just having fun?
Well, I just want to say, I don't want to spoil the other paths that there are, but I will say that when I read it my way, I thought that it was like a metaphorical tale of a man going through a midlife crisis and dying on the inside multiple times. I thought it was all metaphorical.
That would probably made for a better book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I prefer the actual deaths myself.
I don't know, with the Porsche and becoming a showgirl and
Celine
managing
Dion.
a gas station and his
Well, what
family.
if we've been reading it wrong this whole time and Dahi actually read the book right?
Well, I
No,
honestly,
that's not possible.
This book is like top 5 for me after reading it the way I did, but I don't have it anymore because it got destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't balance them very well. Okay, so let's jump in now to the second of the main 3 paths, and of course this is the one where you start as a zombie. So you start in the ground, and you just kind of like wake up with dirt all around you. It's very claustrophobic, and you just kind of punch and crawl and grab and scrape your way out of the dirt. You rise up, you look at your hands, and you're like, where's my skin? And then you find a mirror, because there's a mirror store right next to this graveyard. And so you look in the mirror and you're like, ugh. Because you're a zombie.
And also because you look disgusting, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But there is a few paths where you start regaining your humanity, but that's not all of them. So I'm just going to quickly go through my path on this one. So you come out, you find that you're a zombie, and you're like, which in your mind is like, hey, what? I gotta find a new way to live. So you're like, but I'm a little peckish, so I'm gonna get me some Cornish game hens. And so you go back to the farm, where you're from. And but you find all the hens have been struck by lightning, and there's a large rainbow because it was just raining from the lightning, and the sun is now out. And at the end of that rainbow is a family of innocents, and you're like, well,
Juicy innocence.
yeah, you're like, what did Rome? So,
Was the book actually set in Rome? I wasn't.
they didn't say.
Okay.
So you basically,
I think it was Rome, Georgia.
So you basically have two choices, Caitlin. You basically have two choices at this point. You can either A, eat the innocent family, or B, ride off into the sunset. I chose to eat the innocent family. And so you can choose how you eat them. You can cut them up and sort of like caramelize them with some onions and a little bit of soy sauce. And, oh, hold on. Well, okay. If this shows up in the recording, there's somebody vacuuming next door, and if you hear that, I'm sorry. Anyway, speaking of vacuums, you can also get the vacuum cleaner. And what you can do is you can hide some of the body in the vacuum.
To save it for later.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to starve.
Because then it's vacuum sealed.
For freshness.
I thought it was kind of a bold move on Stanmore's part, where if you choose to eat the family's brains one by one, that he decided to just tell the rest of that path in purely zombie speak. At a lot of trouble following that one, but I thought that was a pretty bold move on his part.
Yeah. And then, of course, at the end of it, basically you run out of people to eat. But unlike the starvation path that Mark pulled in the first one, starting with the gas station, on this one, you just eat yourself until there's nothing left. And then it says the end. So if maybe Paul, if you want to go down one of your choices down the zombie path.
Now the one I chose is after looking at yourself in the mirror for a while, you start to get some of your memories back of like your family and your childhood, and so it leads you back to the same farm, but you know what happens at the farm is a little bit different. You actually find out that the people standing at the end of the rainbow is your family. And so you go over and you live 2-3 years with them, and they're trying to teach, and you slowly start to learn, your English again, even though this said Japanese, because I was thinking it was probably because it was written over there in Japan. But so you learn your natural language, and you start kind of getting some of your human tendencies back. And then at the end of it, you have to make a choice. Do you let your zombie side take over, or do you now let your somewhat human side take over?
Right, yeah.
The moral dilemma path.
Right.
This was the most like existential crisis type path there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And
second to most. There was the one with the hamburger, but...
Right.
Yes, of course. I forgot about that one until you mentioned it.
I decided to go with the human path. And it's strange that in this path, you still end up dying though, but you actually take your own life because you're so hideous looking, because your skin and stuff didn't change. It's just your way of thinking and talking. And you can't live with the fact that you look like a zombie anymore, and you take your own life by, putting your head in a toilet and flushing your head down it.
It takes a weird turn there.
Yeah.
It really did.
It's a little comical.
Well, it's like, dead flesh is like elastic, and it kind of tears easily. So
pliant.
you just flush your own head down.
And it's actually a kind of a sad ending, because in doing so, you leave your loving family with a rather large plumbing bill.
Oh yeah.
And a headless body to deal with.
That toilet is just not right after that.
Yeah. There ain't no plunge in that.
And I thought it was weird that this was like another one of those like internet connection points in the book where Bradley was asking you to send him $150 American to help with his plumbing problem. So I don't know, I thought that was weird.
Right.
Yeah.
And this kind of a scam, because if everybody who read this book sent him $150, he would have like $700 something. Like, that's way more than you need to fix that plumbing. So it's a bit of a scam, I think. But what I like about the path that you said during the zombie humanity path, of course, is that at one point you do get a small paper cut in your zombie skin, and when you try to put hydrogen peroxide on that, it just kind of melts most of your hand away.
Yeah.
And that I just felt was like a deep-seated like cry out for how sometimes when you put hydrogen peroxide on a wound, it feels like your whole hand is melting away.
I took it as like a cry against modern medicine and like the institutionalized healthcare system.
Oh, that makes more sense. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense.
Of course, we have a slightly different perspective on that, being Canadians.
Yes, true.
But anyway, so let's quickly do the last path down this chapter, and then we'll take our ad break, and then we'll do the last part. So the last path, Mark, why don't you and Caitlin describe this together, because there's a couple different branches you can go off on it.
Yeah. So when you wake up and look in the mirror, after you see how hideous you've become, you actually look over and see a 50s pinup girl just standing on the street corner. So, obviously you can make the choice to go speak with her. And what ends up happening is she has a zombie fetish. So she allows you to come back to her home with her. She tries to make sure that you stay in your zombified state because obviously that's what she enjoys. And you want to take it from there, Caitlin?
Yeah, so you move in with her, and she names you Sparkles.
Well, this is the path you picked. You can choose to stay with her. You can also choose to leave. So I think Mark took the leave path, and you're doing the stay
You can choose
path.
to steal her stuff.
I took the leave path.
Okay.
Yeah. So I stayed with her. Her name was Betty Lou, and she
Betty Lou Janbor.
Yeah, Betty Lou
that comes up
Janbor.
later.
That's important
Because of course Janbor is very big in the last. But anyway.
Yeah, so you stay with Betty Lou Janbor. She names you Sparkles, and dresses you in head to latex, which helps with your flesh rotting. It like kind of keeps you all together because it's tight latex.
Tight.
It's real tight. And she teaches you badminton. So you learn badminton, and there's like 5 pages of badminton. I thought that was a little excessive, but and then you go inside and she cooks you a whole roast dinner. And the roast is the head of her neighbor, who she had a long-standing feud with over the fence and the bushes on the side of the house. So she killed him and roasted his head and served it to you for dinner. And you have the option to propose to her. Of course, I proposed to her because I really liked Betty Lou Janbor. And she rips off after you say yes, and she's like, okay, let's go to the priest immediately. So you rush out, you go to the priest, you get a marriage right away. And the second the marriage is declared legal by the priest, she rips off a mask, and it's Bob Stevens Janbor. Yeah. And he's like, I've got you now, Bob Stevens Janbor. And you
Even
die
though
of
this
fright.
wasn't Bob Stevens Tambor at all.
Yeah.
He just thought it was.
Yeah. And you die of fright, and that's the end of that one.
Interesting. Now, Mark, your path of leaving is quite a bit shorter, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. What happens actually is by choosing to leave Betty Lou, you actually end up at the farm again.
That damn farm.
And then you can, pick up the story from there, make those choices of, either deciding to stay a zombie or become human. And
so it just basically loops back into the other one then at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, cool. Dahi.
Yeah, I actually have. I got a completely different perspective on this as well. I thought it all looped back into that midlife crisis. I thought that the zombie stuff was just him like drudging through his day through depression and just working on the farm and just slaving away, and looking at himself in the mirror and seeing a horrible person. And then he ended up seeing this pinup girl. I thought that he was cheating on his wife, with this prostitute and
this floozy.
Yeah, and then ended up deciding to leave his family. That's what I got from it. I sort of saw the whole thing and thought it was all one story.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's crazy the way that happened. It's so crazy. Let's take an ad break. So this podcast is brought to you by Etsy. Come get your crafts and cheap books, you slut.
It's also brought to you by Celine Dion's battery line. They will go on and on like her heart.
It's also brought to you by business cards. How else are you going to get somebody's number?
And it's also brought to you by brain sandwiches. You crunch them, you munch them until you get your fill.
This episode is also brought to you by Japanizon. Buy stuff from us, and we swear we won't report you to the Japanese government.
This episode is also brought to you by Japanese Gachapon capsule machines. I like the little console ones, like the PlayStation, where you plug in the little controller. It's cute.
It's also brought to you by Fuka Books, where it's the best
Fuka-you books.
Fuka-you books. It's the best Fuka. But I can't say that word.
Fuka-you. Books.
It's also brought to you by Goosebumps, which is another alternate Goosebumps alternate 2 Goosebumps. And
yeah, penned by the Irma Gerd girl.
Yep.
And this episode finally is brought to you by the website www.japanazon/etsy.what/cheeseburger. And if you go to that website, enter in the promo code tubcpodcast, they will send you a free 6-pack of these books to balance. But also, if you go there and enter in the promo code Pointless Discussions, they will the site will error out.
Usually does.
But it's a really cute error message.
Yeah.
Like there's like a little puppy.
It's like a little PlayStation console with a controller that you plug in.
And a little puppy chewing on the cord. Yeah.
Anyway, so back to the farm.
No, we're done with the farm.
Oh, right. That was the last one. Okay, so back to the book. So, of course, we're going to go now quickly down the last major story path. And, of course, this one starts... Dahi, since you've seen all of these multiple times, why don't you go ahead and give us the way the last one starts?
Well, I don't know where the starts were, to be fair. But I seem to vaguely remember something about being a pilot and flying for the first time.
That's true, yeah. You start out as a pilot. You are, in fact, the world's only pilot.
Paul? And there was nothing but static over the air traffic control stuff. There was just nothing.
Right, and because everybody was on coffee break.
Yeah.
But so you're the world's only pilot, Paul. Mm-hmm. Paul Markinson.
That's why Mark and I really love this book.
Yeah, so he's one of my favorite characters, actually.
Well, then, of course, you have your flight control, who, when he comes back from coffee break, you have Mark Paulison. Which is also, so they have like a real close relationship going on there, which, some
of the paragraphs I read were real close.
Yeah, they also involve Celine Dion, which doesn't happen, so...
That struck me as a little bit more fanfic than anything.
Yeah. So Mark and Paul, why don't you guys go down your paths on the pilot?
All right. Well, I decided to choose the land the plane in Mexico path, and so what he does is Mark Paulison tells Paul Markinson about, a place in Mexico where he heard that there weren't any zombies. So they decide to land, and it's actually like a really nice resort there. And when you get there, you have to make a whole lot of hard choices. Like, do you want a margarita or a beer?
Or malaria.
Or malaria, yeah. And one of the choice that I don't know why I do this, but I always choose to drink the water. So I order the water, and then you spend the last part of the book pretty much on the toilet.
With malaria.
With malaria, yeah.
And malaria-induced diarrhea.
And then you end up dying from dehydration on the toilet. And it's sad when Mark Paulison finds you on the toilet dead and tries to give you CPR for hours and hours, but only to realize that he was blowing air into the wrong end.
Right. I'd also like to... Wow. I'd also like to point out that, of course, the reason why the water gives you malaria is nothing to do with Mexico itself. It's just because the water just happened to have a lot of mosquitoes in it, and those mosquitoes were carrying the malaria virus.
Of course, the infrastructure of the country was all down because of the zombie outbreak that had happened.
Yeah.
Right, so the malaria was just running rampant. And also... this is completely the fault of the author if anything's inaccurate. So, take it up with R.L. Stine.
No. Why would you?
Well, because he's already got a feud with him, so this will give him more fuel to the fire, right? So everybody tweet R.L. Stine about this, by the way, because we really need to get him on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so of course... the other path that you can take, so you can choose to land in Mexico. You can also choose to land at Pearl Harbor. in Hawaii, and so you go there because again they're thinking, oh, island, right? So island will be safe. But unfortunately, that island is the secret lair of Bob Stevens' Janbor.
Yes.
And he's taken over the whole island.
It's like a mountain that's carved in the shape of his head.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you fly right in through the mouth of the giant mountainous Janbor. Sorry, Janbor, not Tanbor. Tanbor's off living on the farm. Janbor.
Well, you see, okay, so I was confused here because I thought Janbor and Tanbor were the same person. I thought it was after he had married
Betty Lou.
Exactly.
No, Betty Lou Janbor and Bob Stevens Janbor were the same person.
You see, I didn't get to that because my book got destroyed before I could read that.
Right.
So I thought that he had took her name when he got married to her.
Well, in a way, he did take her name because he went by it. So, but Janbor,
but he didn't physically take it.
Well, I mean, he wrote it with a pen a lot, so that was kind of physically taking it.
Taking it down.
Yeah,
but he didn't have anybody to take it from because he was all the time Betty Lou Janbor at the same time. Maybe it was multiple personalities. I don't know. They didn't really go into it too much, but
I took it as a drag situation.
Yeah, well, either way, he's evil. So, that's why he's got his evil lair in Hawaii. And so you fly right through the mouth of Janbor, the mountainous mouth of Janbor, and right into Janbor's lair. And you see that is where he has concocted the zombie virus, which he releases through the lightning. And every time he makes the lightning happen, he has to control the weather, where you add some rain to get a storm, and then the sun always comes out afterwards, which leaves a rainbow, which is like his calling card. Hence the title of the book.
Lightning Struck Rainbow.
Thank you.
Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
And you also find out that the chemical he's releasing in the lightning was also being released into the water around Mexico and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which the mosquitoes then were attracted to because they're attracted to water. And they got malaria because they were over in Africa for a bit.
Well, and then the mosquitoes became malaria-ridden zombie mosquitoes.
Well, they came over from Africa, where malaria is most common, and of course, because of their new zombified mosquito state, they never died, so they just went around. So anyway, but if you have any problems with that, you can just blame Stanmore.
Yeah, Bradley.
Yeah, Bradley Stanmore. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so you get the big final confrontation with Janbor, and basically you have two choices. You can either kick him or punch him.
Yeah.
And this is also an existential crisis because what Janbor does is he pulls out a cheeseburger.
Yes.
And he says, if you kick me, I will drop this cheeseburger. But if you punch me, I will give you this cheeseburger. And you're like, oh, I mean, a kick by nature is more powerful, but a punch results in a cheeseburger. So what do I do? Now, who here by vote, other than Dahi, because he did both, who here by vote punched him?
Yeah, I punched him.
I did.
I kicked him.
I also kicked him. Because the cheeseburger, for all I knew, had malaria in it.
The cheeseburger was described in such a delicious way, I just couldn't pass it up. Plus, I hadn't eaten that yet that day when I was reading it, so I couldn't. So
I think what we'll do is, Caitlin, you and Paul can describe your experience punching him, and then Mark and I will describe our experience kicking him.
Yeah, so you punch him, and he says, "Thank you very much," and hands you the cheeseburger. Actually, he kind of he puts it in your mouth for you to eat out of his hand, which was a little odd and kind of sensual at the same time. I enjoyed it.
Okay, I want to hear the rest from Paul now.
So after he gets done feeding you the hamburger,
cheeseburger.
cheeseburger. Sorry, you can't forget the cheese on it. That makes it
totally different things otherwise. Anyway.
So you finish the cheeseburger and you actually end up marrying him on the island there.
Yeah.
Because he becomes Betty Lou again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like drag. He just does his makeup and hair and everything.
Yeah, but it just makes Paul Markinson feel better that way.
Yes.
And they reuse the same paragraph from the other path for the wedding as well.
Yeah. It's just kind of recycled.
Exactly.
There. So yeah, and then it's basically a happy ending. You guys go off and you rule the Hawaii together. But if you choose to kick him, things go a little bit differently because first of all, when you kick him, you can choose to kick him in the right shin or the left shin, and that also makes a big difference. Mark, did you go left or right? Or sorry, yeah.
I actually went left shin.
You went left shin? Okay, cool. So I went right shin, and when you kick him in the right shin, because he's holding the cheeseburger in his right hand, he drops the cheeseburger to the right of him, which of course falls through a vacuum sealed chamber, which is the island's waste disposal system. And that cheeseburger ends up clogging the whole system, which makes the entire island erupt because he plugged into the volcanoes because it just incinerated the garbage. So all the volcanoes on the island erupt at the same time because you kicked his right shin. And the whole thing just evaporates into liquid hot magma, and everything burns and dies, and you are left there with a fiery death. And as you're melting in the end, you have a choice. You can either give a thumbs up as you melt down into the lava, or you cannot. And I chose to give the thumbs up. And then I put on a pair of sunglasses and said, I won't be back.
I thought the other option, like you could do thumbs up or you could do the blood gang symbol on your way down.
Well, yeah, that's a little known
Mark,
fact that...
You know.
I see.
Yes.
I didn't choose
the left
that.
shin.
So, yeah, you chose the left shin.
Yes. Well, come to find out that his one weakness is actually in his left shin. So when you kick him, he actually falls to the ground and slowly starts turning into a statue. But the good thing about this, he's still holding on to the cheeseburger. He doesn't actually drop the cheeseburger if you kick him in his left shin.
Yeah,
but he starts turning into a statue.
Well, they called that his Medusa shin.
Yes, yes, that is correct. So he turns into a statue, and you sit there and you watch him slowly solidifying. I really liked how he explained this on this page too, but while you're watching him turn into stone, you're just completely fixated on that cheeseburger, hoping and praying that it doesn't also turn into stone. So you watch him finish turning into stone, and the cheeseburger was actually spared. So what you do is you walk over, grab the cheeseburger.
I was so relieved.
Yes, I was too. And the way, so you walk over and you grab the cheeseburger from the statue. You look at it, looks like the most delicious thing that you have ever seen, but you take a bite and you realize that it was actually undercooked. And then that's the end of the path.
See, I was okay with that because I like my meat a little rare.
Yeah, but the problem is that then, it doesn't say this because that's the end of it, but I inferred, of course, that like the Hawaiian food and safety standards practice would be on your ass about that, and you'd probably get your volcano shut down. Because you served
it would not end well after that.
Yeah, you served a rare cheeseburger. It's just not good.
Now, the way that it was structured for myself was basically it was Bob working in the gas station trying to solve this couple's dispute with his employees, right? And then the next paragraph,
Mindy and Jason.
He just says, "Let me tell you a story," and then the next paragraph is just the Hawaii stuff. So I thought that was the story that he was telling to the couple in the gas station.
To calm their nerves.
Exactly.
Let me tell you about the time that I went to an evil emperor's island and kicked him for a cheeseburger.
And he turned into a statue.
And I thought it was supposed to be like teaching the couple what they should value in life. You
right,
know?
and how ultimately your little squabbles are nothing to the problem of should you kick a man or punch a man for a cheeseburger.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Not
One
to
of
mention
life's
the
big
fact-
questions.
Not to mention the fact that if you make the wrong choice, you could erupt all the volcanoes on an island and be a badass Terminator.
But if
So
you make
just
the right
never-
choice, you could be centrally fed a cheeseburger by a man named Bob Stevens, who also is Betty Lou, and marry that man.
and then get your restaurant shut down for serving undercooked meat. You never know what's going to happen. That's the whole
thing
point.
about life.
So that's why this book is great. But of course, there's the one secret ending that I talked about. So if you pick exactly the right choices from all the paths together and you go down this one thing, it destroys your book. And Dahi got there because he was just flipping pages. So this one, of course, am I the only one who did the secret ending other than
No,
Dahi?
I got it.
Okay.
I mean, I had my book plugged in to the wall the whole time, like using the USB outlet. So obviously I got the
But
the
Mark
last
and
ending.
Paul, you guys didn't do this because you
We've
didn't know
never
about it.
done
No, I've never gotten the secret path.
Okay, so it starts out in the hospital gas station thing. So you got to start with that one. So you go through that, and then you choose to manage the gas station. So you have to become the gas station manager. But where the thing starts to divulge into the secret path, so there's one, and you almost miss it because you don't really know it's a choice. But basically, when you're stocking the chips, you can either choose to put the Pringles sour cream ruffle. You can choose to put them on. You can choose to put them on peg 3, row 4, or peg 2, row 6. And if you put those sour cream and onion ruffles on row 2, peg 6.
Peg 2, row 6.
That's the same thing. If you choose to do that, a secret room opens up inside the gas station that you didn't know about. So then you go into that room and you find a computer terminal that is giving a live feed of Hawaii. And so if you click through onto that, you can see that there is a base being built there, and it's being built by your rival, Bob Stevens Janbor, because of course in this path you're playing as Bob Stevens Tanbor.
Yeah.
So then what you do is you have another choice at this point. So you can either choose to go about your business and forget it, or you can choose to go back to the farm and get some supplies from your neighbor. Because of course Bob Stevens Tanbor is the neighbor of the guy that you play as the zombie in the second path. So if you go to the neighbor's place, you can get some supplies, including a pilot's license, and become the world's second pilot. Then you can choose to either kill the family or go be a pilot. Mm-hmm. So if you choose to not kill the family arbitrarily and instead go be a pilot, you meet Mark Paulison. And when you have a discussion with Mark Paulison, he offers you to go to lunch, and you can choose to either go to Olive Garden or Popeyes. Now, if you choose Olive Garden, he will ask you which state, because the quality of Olive Garden in the United States, unlike Canada, varies wildly by state. Mm-hmm. So if you choose to go to Olive Garden in, say, California, you're going to have a bad time. But if you go to Olive Garden in Washington, it's pretty good. So you choose the Washington path. Then, when you get to Olive Garden, you can choose either the unlimited salad and breadsticks or the unlimited soup and breadsticks. If you choose the soup option, they will say that the soup of the day is cream of potato and leek. If you choose to have the soup, then what will happen is inside the soup will be a ticket to Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So you go to the airport. And you can either choose to charter a flight from Paul Markison, or
fly yourself.
You can fly yourself.
Yeah.
And if you choose the fly yourself path, you make a quick pit stop in Mexico. And when you get to Mexico, you can either choose...
It's an interesting flight path.
You can either choose... Well, you can choose to fly directly to Hawaii, or you can take the pit stop in Mexico. If you choose to take the pit stop in Mexico, you can choose to either have a sangria or some water. If you choose the water, you'll get malaria. Now, when you get malaria, you can choose to either treat it or just keep going. If you choose to treat it, you actually go back to the place you started in the States, and you go back to the gas station. And in going back to the gas station, you find ibuprofen or acetaminophen. If you take acetaminophen, then you get back in your plane, you go to Hawaii, and you meet Bob Stevens Janbor. And Bob Stevens Janbor gives you a choice. Either eat this cheeseburger or take this key. And if you take the key, it leads you back to the gas station where you were. And if you put the key into the computer terminal, the whole gas station has a choice. It can either continue to run or blow itself up.
Yeah.
And if you choose to blow itself up, you get to the secret page where inside of it is a little wick. And if you light that wick, it will blow your whole book up. And of course, Dahi, you must have just blown the wick up because, like, what the hell, right?
Well, I mean, I thought that was part of the experience.
Well, the page literally says, light this wick and stand back.
And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to light the book on fire because I'm anti, and I don't want to destroy my properties. So I said no, but because I still had the book plugged in to the USB, the built-in microphone heard me say no, and it used a little like spark from the electricity coming through the USB, and it just burned the book up internally. So
yeah, mine actually just blew up in a great huge fireball that not only destroyed my tables but completely unbalanced my books, and in essence destroyed all of them at the same time.
Well, I thought it was about, I this was the conclusion for me. Like, I didn't see any of the rest of the book after that,
because you destroyed it.
Exactly. So I thought that this was, like, again, a metaphor for unfinished business. That he ended up having an explosive meltdown that just stopped him from finishing his dreams and his life goals,
Right, and therein metaphorically stopped you from finishing reading the book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is why it's like top 5 for me, because it works on so many levels for me.
Yeah. Mark, Paul, you guys didn't obviously see the secret ending, but what are your thoughts on it?
See, I always took the cheeseburger instead of the key because I'm like, what do I need with a key when I've got a cheeseburger? So
you actually went through all of the secret paths and made all of those choices I mentioned, except you took the cheeseburger.
Yeah, I've never taken the key in the 357 times I've read this book.
wow.
Oh, wow.
Well, you got to get all those branches, so it makes sense.
Well, it's actually good that you took the cheeseburger, because had you taken the key, you wouldn't have been able to read this book that many times.
Right.
This is true.
And I mean, after making all those decisions, you
I don't really
hungry.
have that much time to read, so whenever I am reading, I try and get through a book as quickly as possible. And with all of those choices that it takes to get to that secret ending, sounds like a real page turner that I probably wouldn't have had time to complete.
No, she's a different author.
Yeah, she wrote Wolves Underground.
Yeah.
You guys had her on
this
the
wasn't
podcast recently. Or a while back. Or
we did, but that's a discussion for a previous time. This is not a page turner. This is a
Bradley
Stanmore.
Bradley Stanmore.
And I just wanted to say, like, after talking about this book, I think Bob Stephen Janbor is actually R.L. Stein.
That makes perfect sense because he's the evil overlord, and then therefore Bradley Stanmore is Bob Stevens Tanbor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
The hero. Yeah.
Oh, I guess it is a commentary on R.L. Stein's work that it just turns people into zombies, right?
And it's a metaphor for Bradley Stanmore's work. Like R.L. Stein causes his work to be destroyed by not letting him ghostwrite. So the book itself is burnt up.
But at the very end, I think the thing we really have to take away is that if it weren't for R.L. Stine, Jack Black probably never would have made another movie. This has been the Totally Unreal Book Club podcast. Thank you all for listening to the Totally Unreal Book Club podcast, our weekly review podcast in association with the Voices of Anarchy, of which everyone here, except for Paul and Mark, are also a member. You can check us out at www.voicesofanarchy.com or on Twitter at voicesanarchy. You can find the podcast on podcast services around the globe, and you can support the podcast on patreon.com/tubcpodcast. That's TUBC podcast. On Twitter and Instagram at TUBC Podcast, and you can literally just find us everywhere else at TUBC Podcast. Please check out Mark and Paul's show, Pointless Discussions, and don't forget to listen to our show, now available on Spotify and services everywhere. And please give us a 5-star rating, a written review, and subscribe to us. It really helps us out. I want to thank once again the panel this week, and you can follow each of us on our personal Twitters at
caitlionroar,
handfofficial,
PD_podcast.
I don't do Twitter.
And willjwood. Thank you all once again, and we'll see you next week.
Always choose the unlimited salad and breadsticks.
Soup.
All right.